hear that jingle, you know we mean business. Good morning and welcome to your Feel Good Breakfast Show, Expresso, right here on S3. Now, while we do our best to help you feel good, especially on a Monday morning, we can't just ignore all the things happening around us. Now, those are usually reflected in the headlines, so we brought in our news editor, our superhero of news, Roi Simpson, in to unpack what has been going on. And as always, we'd love to know what your take on those stories are, so share your thoughts and opinions with us on our WhatsApp line 0634088863 or on social media as well. Now,
this is a safe place.
it is a safe place.
So we can get into the meat of things, or the gristle, as I often like to refer to it. Great to see you, Roy.
Morning,
thank you so
Roy.
much. I've got to say thank you to our viewers, because this has become such an interesting way of seeing the headlines as they're reflected in the lived experience every day. And I think the one lived experience for far too many, 2/3 of South Africans at the moment, unemployment. So last week we saw the release of a couple of quite revealing sets of data in the space, perhaps the most important of them, the latest unemployment figures. Unemployment did rise, but only a little bit. Is that success or failure? I don't know. Before that, things had been improving over most of last year. Roy, is this a little speed bump? Is it a blip in the radar? Is this the bigger picture of doom and gloom? How have you put this in perspective?
It really is an interesting question. The overall picture is doom and gloom. I think at 32.9% now, it was 32.7. I think the one thing we can't lose sight of, even as we go, okay, look, there is 4 quarters in a row of slowly descending unemployment numbers. This is still, by World Bank standards anyway, the world's worst unemployment rate, the world's worst. I mean, I literally saw a mention in one of these reports saying that Sudan, which is currently experiencing a civil war, has better employment figures than...
Yeah, that's not great.
I suppose supply and demand, there is there is a link between those two things, but it's, and I know I'm grossly oversimplifying in this sense. Is this something that can be addressed in the system that we currently have? When you look at this scenario, when you say doom and gloom, is that because there is no answer in sight, or we know the answer, but we're just not getting there? Where does the battle line exist here, do you think?
The battle line to some degree is ideological. And that, of course, it presents a whole set of problems of its own. So, for example, you have the more laissez-faire capitalist approach, where people are saying, take away all these restrictions that business is facing. And there are a lot of them. So, for example, just minimum wage. Now, certainly anyone from the left is going to say that's sacred, that can't be touched.
It's a line in the sand.
Absolutely, because, in fact, it's a harder line than just a line in the sand.
Yeah, it's a line in the concrete. It should be. It's a line in our democracy, yeah.
At the same time, there are all these legislative requirements on, if you are a business owner, you have to do this, that, the next thing, including now a formula for racial demographics within your organization. And these are being promulgated by governments. The government is telling you your HR functionality. It's telling you how many people of what color should be in your organization based on what sector of the economy you're in. And obviously there's an argument that is problematic. So you have that group of people going, unfetter us and the market will create these jobs. And then you've got people going, no, the problem is deeper than that, and going, well, what did America do post the Great Depression? And pointing to Roosevelt's New Deal, where you had the expanded public works program, effectively, and the state absorbing all the unemployed.
All those jobs,
No, look, it's worrying, especially when we talk about unemployment. I mean, you take a look at our youth, you know, who's obviously very, very scared of what the future may hold for them. But I mean, who's worst affected by this? Just very quickly, I mean, 2 out of 3 young South Africans can't find work. I mean, that's what some of the headlines are saying. Is it mostly the youth of South Africa, or is it kind of spread across?
It is disproportionately the youth in a very real way. 62.9% is the youth unemployment rate, and that's between 15 and 24. The other thing is that is the straight unemployment rate, which means that those are people who could work and who are looking for work. The expanded unemployment rate is people who've given up looking for work.
Oh, wow.
And there are too many of the youth in that category as well. Then beyond that, black African women, disproportionately affected. Those who are carrying out work as domestic support. there's 67,000 jobs have been shed in that area in just the past quarter. So that's what you're looking at, young black women in particular, and then depending on where you live. So if you don't want to be living in the Northwest, for example, it's
geography does matter at the moment. Problem or solution? What is the key here? Does someone need to come and give you a job, or do you go out and create that job for yourself? Where does the burden lie? On you, the state? Let us know. 0634088863. We're talking unemployment, all current affairs. In fact, right now, weigh in, have your voice heard.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
If they haven't broken his spirit yet, they're never going to. Let's feed off that energy right now. We're back with our look at the major news stories of the week. And our news editor, Roi Simpson, is back to help us unpack and understand the implications thereof. This one, I'm struggling to understand just how far-reaching and damaging numbers like this can be. Set the scene, my friend.
Look, it's shocking. Before the break, we were talking about the country's unemployment figures, which is serious as well. But now around the data around literacy. Now, the Progress in International Reading Literacy study says 81% of grade 4 students cannot read for meaning. Sure.
Grade 4.
Yeah, grade 4. Now it sounds frightening, Roy. Even the education minister admits that it's one of the worst in the world. Firstly, what is going on and what can we learn from this?
Wow. Well, if we can read for meaning, we could potentially learn quite a lot, unlike the 10-year-olds in South Africa. The minister's been slightly disingenuous when she said it's one of the worst in the world. That's true for a given value because only 57 countries partook in this Pearl's survey. But last time there were 50, and we were stone last out of 50. This time they're 57. And we are stone last out of 57. It's a big study. It's really credible. There are 400,000 kids that take part in this thing. And to give you a sense of how big the problem is, our score was 288. And obviously it's difficult to know what that means. The top score, which was Singapore, was 587. So the gap between first and 57th is 300 points.
Okay.
The gap between us and number 56, so the second worst performer in the world, is 90 points.
Sure.
So we are that far adrift of the other 95% of the participants. So our numbers are really appalling. And the idea that 4 out of 5 10-year-olds in this country can read a piece of text,
Understand.
put it down, and not be able to tell you what happened in that story.
It is a disadvantage that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. If you look at that bridging the gap from school, once you've got, and you can get schools with 100% pass rates that are not converting into job creation. We know that's a whole different conversation, but it's those critical social skills that come with that understanding, the ability to be able to process, that is terrifying. Almost as terrifying as, but it speaks to being able to understand what we're talking about right now. How does life apply to you? Absolutely. It's a dangerous, terrifying thing. Almost as terrifying as, dun dun dun, stage 8. What does stage 8 even look like? The light's never coming back on.
Stage 8 for most people is about 14 hours a day of the lights off. And there've been some interesting discussions recently. We know that Kgosientsho Ramokgopa has admitted that he suspects stage 8 is coming. Recently, though, you'll have noticed that his statements are much vaguer. And I think he's taking his cue from his boss. Because President Cyril Ramaphosa was in the Western Cape and was asked by a journalist, are we going to see stage 8? And his reply was a little bit of a wry smile, which was a bit of a giveaway, I thought, followed by, it's going to be a difficult winter, which is as good as yes. I mean, here's a person.
Let's not go outright and say it, but
just not a principal headline.
And that's what we've got. We know that the schedules up to stage 16 are being prepared at the moment. They should be ready quite soon. And we know that when it was stage 4, we went, stage 4. And then they were preparing something up to stage 8, impossible. But then we were on stage 6. Now we're pretty sure that, let's say in the next 3 weeks, we'll probably touch stage 8. There's a really good chance of that. So I'm afraid, yes, the short answer is there's a really good chance.
Do you feel we're any closer? So much is being spoken about transition, not just the long-term sustainable future, but this immediate transitional phase. Are we all right? Should we be terrified? How are you reading this progression and how fast we're moving through these stages? To that point, how exposed are we, do you think?
I think we're quite exposed. I think the Julius Malemas of the world who are shouting, oh, the grid's going to collapse. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're more sophisticated than that.
To stop that, yeah.
But in terms of an immediate solution, there simply isn't one. So Gwede Mantashe, everyone's brought the car power ships back onto the menu now, and there seems to be an indication that they're coming in.
Thumbs up is there,
However, Liz McDade from the Green Connection has been telling us that once the ship sets sail, and in fact docks here in South Africa, it's still a full 12 months before that's going to start pumping electricity onto the grid.
Yeah, exactly.
Plus, the game plan's changed around car power ship. We're no longer talking about 1,200 megawatts. Suddenly, we're talking about 3,000 megawatts.
Bigger deal.
Yeah, exactly. So it's starting to feel like all those concerns we raised about money are at the forefront of people's minds rather than fixing the electricity problem.
Exactly.
So prognosis, not so good, I'm afraid. A bit dim.
Are we surprised? No, just turn that rheostat up, my friends. Let us know what solutions started popping into your mind as you heard all of these challenges this morning. We'd love to hear from you. 0634088863. Let's keep the conversation going.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast Show Expresso right here on S3. For the last time, we are back with a look at our major news stories of the week with Roi Simpson, and we're going to stick with the international news right now. Roi is here, of course, to help us unpack and just go through those headlines to unpack exactly what they mean. And laugh just a little bit, because news is serious, but we're taking a nice and light approach to it. Now, the G7 nations have been holding a summit meeting as the 7 most economically powerful democracies that have a big influence on world affairs. And the headlines seem to suggest that they are taking a more hardline stance against China. Okay, so Roi, what have this whole thing culminated in? Why are we taking this hardline stance? Because I know that there's diversifying supply chains, there's, to reduce the dependence on one country, and China's not very happy.
No, of course not. It's more about the rhetoric that goes around it, though. Because here you have 7 liberal democracies, 7 capitalist countries. They are economically all the superpowers within their sphere. And they have a problem, certainly judging by the statements that came out of the summit, which was held in Hiroshima. Their statements are all about opposing Chinese economic coercion. That's what needs to be opposed. And I see that, look, yes, this is the same group of nations busy leveling sanctions against Russia, for example, and who have a program of sanctioning countries and individuals whose ideologies and practices they don't agree with.
Different, yeah.
So there's a real smack of hypocrisy about it, and that, of course, plays straight into state media in China, where they're pointing out the hypocrisy of this. But at the same time, there are issues that need to be dealt with. So they're saying to try and ameliorate that and sort of keep a balance, because their problem is they need trade with China. Everything, the whole global economy is so interlinked, and China is such a big cog in that wheel.
Big player,
So to try and ameliorate what they're saying, which is all very negative around China, they were saying we would like to see, the world would like to see a growing China that plays by the international rules. Of course, they're setting the international rules. But one of those, for example, is intellectual property rights. And that is a big
It's massive for South African producers. I've spoken to a lot of guys who are making stuff in China who say if we take it there, it's gone.
It's gone. The next thing, it's on the shelves, replicated, maybe not perfectly, the spelling would be wrong, but it's a quarter of the price. And then that's it. That's your entire business model shot.
Gone.
So that's one of the issues. But yes, you're right. It's very loose around how they're going to cooperate. And if China withdraws its support for a country, they're somehow going to fill that gap. But they haven't told us how they would.
Yeah, come look at our little neck of the woods, see what's happening on the African continent. I think they're far ahead of the curve there. Let's talk about things being taken away from us. We thought sweeteners were fine. The WHO steps in and says, no, for weight loss, sweeteners aren't the right option. What is going on here? We've just debunked the whole weight loss industry.
30 years of statements and support from the WHO, I think the important thing to note here is that people with a pre-existing diabetes condition, this information does not apply to them. I think that's an important caveat. But otherwise, the WHO is basically walking back several decades of wisdom and going, we've had these big studies, and effectively sugar replacements, so non-sugar sweeteners, just produce no results in terms of reducing weight loss. They don't help in avoiding the onset of diabetes. In fact, the data suggests that the cardiovascular problems are increased by a lot of these. And in fact, the onset of type 2 diabetes is actually, driven by these non-sugar sweeteners. So it's a complete reversal of the previous wisdom. This is intended for government consumption at this stage, but of course we're going to discuss it in the public realm.
Sure,
but effectively sweeteners are off the table. The WHO says they are not the thing we're looking for. It's obviously going to destroy an entire industry, as you said. Maybe it's good news for the sugarcane farmers.
For something, the OG's back in the hood. But I think the bottom line here is the headline for today: there are no quick fixes. Unfortunately, a diet ain't going to do it. It's that fundamental shift, I think. But these have been some crazy headlines. If it's shaken your foundations a little bit, we'd love to know how. 063-408-8863 if you want to chat about anything this morning. Even leg day, you're allowed to do it, because every day is leg day. And then a little bit of core.